Good morning to all of you and welcome to a very timely discussion. The European Union needs to take major steps towards the electrification of its economy. Across buildings, energy and transport, this transition is what will make Europe more competitive, more independent and more resilient. And we've come a long way already, but there's still a very long road ahead. One of the most visible changes already underway is the electrification of transport. It is no longer a vision of the future, it is happening right now. Electric mobility is a key driver of Europe's competitiveness and a cornerstone of our decarbonization efforts. It offers opportunities for technological progress, for profitable investments, secure jobs and reduced dependence on expensive imported fossil fuels. Electricity grids are the backbone of this transition. They are the highways that will carry future progress and prosperity. So, stronger, smarter grids are a must-have for a stronger European economy. If we are going to integrate more electrical vehicles, more renewables, and increasingly energy-efficient buildings, a thorough modernization is a must. And in doing that, we must look not only at today's needs, but at the technologies and demands of the years to come. Our focus should be on building an ecosystem that encourages investment in infrastructure to keep pace with the rapid development of electromobility. Doing that will require smarter planning, better coordination and greater transparency. A system that will help operators, industry and local authorities to work together in a better and in a more efficient way. Through improved tools such as grid capacity hosting maps that help investors make informed decisions and that allow permitting processes to move faster. Or through better management of grid connections, so to prioritize projects that truly benefit the electricity system and to clear away speculative ones that block progress right now. So today's discussion, which I unfortunately cannot join, is both timely and important. And in just a few weeks, the European Commission will present its grids package that will hopefully offer us many of these tools. And the conversations you are having today will be vital for shaping the future of Europe's electricity and electromobility systems. Two areas that are deeply interconnected, no pun intended, and that must be planned and developed in coordination if we want our transition to succeed. I wish you all a productive discussion and I look forward to hearing your conclusions.
Thank you, Mr. Tobak, for this intervention and for setting the scene for this webinar. We'll jump right in. I must admit that we have some technical issues with our moderator, Paul Wilczek. He will be with us as soon as possible. But in the meantime, I would like to first give the floor to Tom House. Tom House is Policy Advisor to Director General at DG ENER of the European Commission to tell us more about the upcoming here we go. Hi, Tom. Nice to see you. The upcoming priorities from the European Commission in terms on how to support smooth and swift integration of electric mobility into the grid. Tom, can you give us a bit of context here? And then I also have a few questions for you, of course. And of course, I would like to incentivize or make sure everybody online can also ask any question they want. On the Q&A, there's a Q&A on the right side of your screen, also a chat box if you want to also intervene. So that's my small call for everybody to be participating to this webinar. Paul, please go ahead.
Sure, happy to. Thanks for the invitation and good morning, everybody. Well, to follow what was just said, there's so much going on in the energy and mobility space. The policies that we have that are driving forward decarbonization, improving our security, and driving down the cost of energy are all contributing to the evolution of the e-mobility in the transport sector. Electrification is a large part of all of these goals, and electrification needs more supply, more clean energy. It needs more demand. It needs electrification of all sectors, including transport, which aren't currently using electricity. It certainly needs more grid, more flexibility, more novel technologies, and more digitalization. So there's a lot that needs to come for all of this to work. But in fact, there's already so much going on that's come out of the European Commission and the EU in terms of setting the framework, establishing the technologies and the right regulatory environment. From the electricity market design perspective, we've got requirements to roll out dynamic pricing, make it easier for aggregators to take part, and generally improve flexibility in the electricity market, which is a necessary part of bringing in batteries and demand response into the way the electricity grid works. It does two things. It facilitates the increased rollout of renewables, particularly variable renewables, wind and solar, but it also means there's a big role for the transport sector to play in terms of providing flexibility and balancing in the electricity market. So there's the electricity market design stuff and all that's happening on flexibility. That includes the network code that's coming forward, the methodology, the assessment that will happen next year. So a lot going on. Then under the Renewable Energy Directive, there's a lot going on working with data. The requirements to have real-time data available, the state of the battery, and availability and exchange of that data across different market players. So there are requirements there which are still being put into place. And of course, there's AFIR, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, which again has the objectives for infrastructure deployment, rules on the data access, on interoperability, on bidirectional charging and the like. So there's a lot going on. And our job is to make sure that all the players are around the table and that this happens seamlessly, that there's easy and seamless exchange of data between consumers, between businesses managing that on the energy side, on the mobility side. So there's a lot of moving parts, but we're doing a lot to bring all of that together in terms of the technical support that we're providing, the EU funding that's available for all of this, and the different working groups we have. Not least the Data for Energy group and the Coalition of the Willing group, where we bring together all the people who need to make this happen: the system operators, distribution and transmission, the suppliers, the aggregators, car and heat pump manufacturers, charge point operators, mobility service providers. These are all the people who need to be around the table to discuss and come up with the agreements on interoperability, the different standards, the different approaches that are needed to make it all happen. We had a great meeting in November where there's real progress made in terms of this agenda. And there's ongoing work amongst the experts of these groups to provide input into our forthcoming strategic roadmap on AI and digitalization, as well as to really support on-the-ground implementation or incorporation among system operators. TenneT, Turner, APG, they're all coming together to really make all of this happen. So there's a lot happening already. And then we've also got the grids package, as mentioned, coming up. The grids package is really just trying to review where we are in terms of the way the planning system is working across infrastructure, across the different fuel sources of infrastructure, electricity, gas, hydrogen, CCUS, and how the planning regimes for all of these, not least the linkages between what's going on in the heat development planning. There are local heating plans, there are national energy and climate plans, there's resource adequacy assessments, there's seasonal assessments, there's the 10-year network development plan. All of these could be more coherent. So we want, with the forthcoming grids package, we really want to tackle the way this planning is done and to make sure that there's coherence, whether it's bottom up or top down. There needs to be detail, granularity, and coherence across all of these planning exercises. So that's a critical element that the grids package needs to tackle. Also on the permitting side, you know that the Commission's done a lot already in terms of streamlining, smoothing, and trying to speed up the permitting regimes across the energy sector. And that also needs to happen on the infrastructure side, whether it can be a question of literally digitalizing the permitting process so that itself becomes clearer, more transparent, and faster, or developing other regimes, such as we have on the renewables front, such as fast-tracking certain zones that are already in compliance on environmental grounds and so on, so that they could be fast-tracked for particular projects. So that's the kind of ongoing streamlining work we want to do on the permitting side in the grids package. And then, of course, there's important for the Commission is the cross-border dimension of infrastructure development. There's always a gap between what we think is necessary in terms of increased cross-border capacity and what gets done between different member states. So we want to look again at the cost sharing arrangements we have to be sure that all the different benefits, including the system-wide benefits from cross-border infrastructure, are reflected in the calculus, and then that which can then support the deployment of more cross-border infrastructure to make sure we're better interconnected and therefore more efficient across the whole of the grid. So those are three core elements of the grids package, the amendment to the 10E regulation. At the same time, we'll be coming forward with guidance on grid connections. Now, everyone knows every sector wants priority for access to grids, whether they're new generation coming on or new consumers wanting to offtake. There's a vast need. We know the queues are growing and growing. So there's definitely a need to review some of the antiquated practices that exist in terms of grid connection regimes and to follow the best practice, which is popping up in different member states around the EU. A need to move away from speculative with just a first come, first served basis, which means that we can end up with quite a bit of speculative or immature projects in the pipeline, which are blocking developments. We need greater flexibility in terms of access. So given that the electricity sector itself needs to become more flexible, one way to bring in flexible supply and demand is to offer flexible connections. So there's all sorts of novel arrangements which some TSOs and systems are already working with, but there's a lot of good practice out there, but also a lot of old-fashioned practice which really needs updating. So that's what the guidance will concentrate on. We'll provide the toolbox of what planning and what grid connection regimes could do to improve themselves. So that's coming out still in the next couple of weeks or so. And then, of course, next year, on top of everything else, we'll have the Electrification Action Plan, which is just, in essence, it's going to be picking up the gaps or any new ideas that stakeholders are coming up with that can make all of this happen faster. So I guess my message here today is that there's a lot going on. We're making some great progress, really on-the-ground progress, for instance, through the data for energy work, when it comes specifically to what's needed to roll out smart and bidirectional charging and boost e-mobility. We've got the grids package coming out, and basically, if there are still things that need doing, tell us. We've had various consultation regimes underway, but we think there's a lot going on. We're getting people around the table to make all of this happen. I hope that's reassuring, that we're giving you the detail that you need to understand what's planned, what's going to go ahead, that the direction of travel is certainly clear, and that all of this is providing a clearer, more transparent environment for consumers to take part, for businesses to join in, and for investors to make the investments needed to make all of this happen. So that's my version of where we're going. I'm happy to have your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think it's a broad, very clear and detailed overview. And my first question was on the timeline on this EU grid package, but you already answered to this one, so thank you so much. I already have a question on the chat from Adriana. Can you tell us more about the DG NERT Plan 2026 timeline for the revision of the requirement for generators and the demand code connection? It's a bit of a side topic, but I think very much related. Do you have some insight about this?
Not a lot, I'm afraid. I mean, the work on the demand response network code, which has implications for the other guidelines, is ongoing. That's still planned. I'm pretty sure that's still coming out in the first quarter. I don't, and that will have subsequent amendments. But that's the timeline as I know it.
Thank you very much. One question from my hand as well. We work very much on the alternative fuel infrastructure regulations. That's also going to be revised in 2026. Can you tell us more about that? How do you work with DG Move to make sure that there is a connection and a coherence between the EU grid package and the other elements that you just mentioned, and the alternative fuel infrastructure revision, which is from our perspective? And I'm also very happy that you mentioned how important it is for all these stakeholders and all these different sectors to get together to create this ecosystem. For us, it's very important that they are thought and designed together. Can you tell us more about both the process, but also if you already have some insight about the revision of the ERF?
Well, I mean, the first thing is just to reassure you the way the Commission works is that we have everyone within the Commission gets around the table in inter-service groups to make sure that what is being planned is absolutely coherent from all relevant policy perspectives. With DG Move, which is literally next door, we have a long history, not least with the 10, well, we call it 10E, they have 10T framework, so a similar regulatory framework. We both use Connecting Europe facility, so we're familiar with the financing tools that we have, and we have the inter-service group on AFIA. So I really don't think there's any chance for incoherence in the way we work together and develop that. As I understand it, the timing is that in the course of next year, we'll be having public consultations, we'll be preparing the impact assessment on the review, undertaking the review, so that by the end of the year, we have a clear understanding of what's working, what needs reinforcement, or any other changes. But that process will probably follow our fairly well-known and transparent regulatory process of review, not least including the public consultation that's a necessary part of all of that. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll be well notified in advance of our thinking, of the different options that we'll be putting out there. You'll have the impact assessment when it comes. So I think I hope that's reassuring that we'll be following that standard process. We will be as coherent as always, and let you know what's going on.
You can count on us about this, and to make sure the coherence is there as well. Any other question in the Q&A? I don't see anyone now, but I invite everybody to ask any questions to Tom while he is here. In the meantime, maybe I can pass to the mic to our next two speakers. Antoine Picron, Director for Public Affairs at ChargePoint, and Laia Guitar, Senior Policy Manager at EDSO. Antoine and Laia will be presenting the recent publication from the Platform for Electromobility. The Platform for Electromobility, which is organizing this webinar, is a coalition of now 45 members across the whole ecosystem of electric mobility. And that's why I underline the importance, along with Tom, about all these sectors talking together to create this ecosystem. We published a couple of months ago actually now already, a series of recommendations, 10 recommendations on how to integrate the electric mobility into the grid in a swift but also smooth and soft for the grid. Why did we come up with this public consultation, which we will share the link in a minute as well. Back in March 2025, the Automotive Action Plan announced EU grid package and a series of measures in this direction to ensure a smooth integration of EVs into the grid. So we took this announcement very seriously, and then we worked together very closely as well with the members of EDSO. Laia will be able to tell us more about EDSO in a couple of minutes, to have very much of a cross-sectoral collaboration on how to align our priorities between the automotive industry, charge point industry, grid management industries, DSO, TSOs. We try to have all these people on the table to come up with 10 recommendations that we're going to present you in a few minutes. The paper was published in July 2025. We're still discussing it now with the relevant stakeholders, and that's also why we wanted to have this public discussion now, to also discuss it with a broad audience. It was designed and created by the Platform for Electromobility, but also by EDSOs, and accepted by all members of both coalition. Last point I want to tell you about this publication, and then I will give the floor to Antoine and Laia. The three key topics to address in this publication. The first one is how to accelerate, or at least make more efficient, the grid connection request. Tom, you mentioned it, that everybody wants to accelerate grid connections, so we have some recommendations about that. The second part on standardization and interoperability. The ecosystem of electric mobility is very much of an interlinked ecosystem, and standardization and interoperability is very important to make it happen and to create the right condition. And then finally, of course, the need for investments. how to develop both public and private investment, and to make sure that the investment is allocated at the right place. That said, I will give the floor to Laia and Antoine, so I can bring Laia and Antoine on screen. Thank you so much, Tom. I'll monitor the questions for you if there are any in the chat, but I'll give the floor to Antoine and Laia for now. So Antoine and Laia, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can see you on stage, so it's wonderful. I believe Laia, you wanted to take the floor first, so please go ahead, and I will take myself off the stage for now.
Yes, thanks so much, Theo. Thanks for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here today on behalf of the Platform for E-Mobility, presenting Swift and Smooth. What makes this paper truly valuable, in my opinion, is not only the number of stakeholders that subscribe it, but also how it managed to connect the energy and mobility sectors in a very unique way. The paper has a total of 11 recommendations, and I will walk you through the 6 recommendations on how to accelerate grid connection requests. And then my colleague Antoine will present 2 recommendations on how to foster interoperability, and 3 recommendations on how to anticipate future needs in a better way, as we are doing right now. But before moving to the recommendations, we needed to understand the reasons behind them. So behind the connection queues, and it was a long discussion, which I tried to summarize in this diagram, which has already been introduced somehow by Tom, and which I hope it is comprehensive. So the first challenge for grid connection queues is, as we all know, that we have limited grid capacity due to the growing demand for electricity and the fact that the existing network was not originally planned or designed to cope with this. Moreover, there is a large part of the infrastructure that is aging, and expanding it is something that takes a lot of time, leaving aside resources. The second challenge is the first come, first served principle. The issue here is that currently, connection processes often follow a chronological order, and DSOs are not able to consider the project maturity or the system benefits that might be linked to a project to assess its connection. So as a result, we see a lot of speculative applications in where developers will apply just to check if they can connect, and also the so-called ghost projects that book capacity even if they might never materialize. So when they do that, they block away capacity from other projects, and they also take a lot of time and resources. Then on top of this, we have the lengthy permitting processes that connection applications face, both at the DSO level, but also from the perspective of public authorities. So with this in mind, we try to set the context and develop a set of recommendations on how to accelerate grid connection requests for e-mobility, addressing these main issues. So the first recommendation is, The first recommendation is moving away from the first comes, first served principle, given that if system operators are able to actively manage queues, they can address the inefficiencies from speculative applications. In order to do this, it is essential to establish clear criteria for prioritization at EU, but also at national level, that is defined by governments and national regulators. The second recommendation touches upon flexible connection agreements, which allow EV charging points to connect to the grid faster, even in the cases in which the grid is congested, by offering non-firm capacity while the grid is expanding. This has already a legal basis under European regulation, but we are currently facing multiple transposition issues that are preventing the implementation of flexible connection agreements across the EU, which is slowing down connections. The third recommendation is to ensure that grid capacity maps are regularly updated and also consulted before applying, because this and only this will reduce the number of speculative applications and will empower project developers at the same time. And this recommendation goes pretty much linked or hand in hand with the need to increase transparency in demand, because if system operators know EV demand forecasts in advance, they can steer the grid to support disconnections. And this can be done, for instance, if CPOs would share with the system operators current and future connection plans. Of course, this should always be done under confidentiality agreements and protecting at all times commercial sensitivities. But it would be useful to then reduce the waiting times. Another solution, maybe Theo, can you? Yes, thanks. Another solution is the digitalization of connection requests, which is essential to move beyond the current manual and time-consuming processes to authorize requests. This, however, requires supporting the digitalization of system operators and allowing them to recover costs, moving to a more TOTEX-based approach rather than a CapEx methodology. Then the platform does also acknowledge that while DSOs or system operators must remain technology neutral, market needs from emerging segments may be carefully considered and balanced. This can be done, for instance, by including projects that provide system value in the prioritization criteria. And last, smart pricing would ensure that consumers use the grid more efficiently, and this would require regulators to implement network varying network tariffs. All this would support the electrification, the acceleration of the processes associated with grid connection requests, and it plays also a key role in the electrification of transport, given that the availability to connect charging station is essential to prevent range anxiety and to provide EV users with security of supply. That said, though, accelerating connection requests is not the only issue in the table. Interoperability and the anticipation of future demand also remain key issues. So I would like to now pass it to my colleague Antoine to develop this in a little bit more of detail, and I would be happy to take any questions if there's any on the chat.
Thank you very much, Laia, for this presentation. Let's indeed hear from Antoine a few more recommendations we would like to present, and then we'll open the floor for questions and discussions. So please, everybody, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. I see already a few. Don't hesitate to go further. And please, Antoine, you can drive us through the rest of the recommendation of the platform.
With pleasure, Theo. Thanks, Theo. Thanks, Laia. Hi, everyone. So indeed, the second set of recommendation that we've established with the platform when we're looking at the grid and the electrification of transport is about standardization to enable interoperability and data sharing. If we take a step back and look at why this is fundamental, we're shifting from a paradigm where we had two sectors, the energy and the transport sectors, that did not need to speak to each other often and did not need to speak the same language. If you take an internal combustion engine, the only real touch point between this system is when gas is delivered to the vehicle at the pump. There's no need for a deep integration, and the two sectors can work rather well in silos. This logic does not hold with electric vehicles. Not only EVs are a way to go from a point A to a point B, but there are also batteries on wheel, that is decentralized energy resources. So you have a direct link between grid capacity, tariff, flexibility, with transport uptime and cost. And we're seeing the development of new use cases that are relevant for both sectors, the energy and the transport sectors. So which is energy trading, smart charging, V2Gs, integration of more volatile renewable energy sources, grid services, etc. So this involves complex business model with players and stakeholders in both sectors. Drivers, of course, but also DSOs, TSOs, CPOs, MSPs, VPPs, aggregators, and a bunch of other acronyms that I will spare you with. But this is why we with the platform are recommending that both sectors should speak the same language going forward. And to do this, we're recommending a clear guideline for data sharing formats and common standards at the European level for charging infrastructure, EV, and grid, to ensure that EVs and charging stations can interact with the grid across the EU and provide those flexibility and new services I was speaking about. Of course, we need to take into consideration industry capabilities and market maturities and the development of those standards. And here the role of the STF is crucial. But we believe that the promotion of common standard is paramount if we want to ensure interoperability and reliability across flexible and smart charging systems in the European Union. The second recommendation is about EU-wide certification of assets. The certification for assets connecting to the grid play a crucial role in ensuring that charging infrastructure comply with technical quality standards and safety requirements. This to ensure that the infrastructure is compatible with the operational requirement of the grid, that there is a promotion, that there is protection of user and grid operator with correct installation procedure, and the confirmation of the infrastructure reliability, durability, and performance over time. So establishing common EU-wide certification requirements and procedure would support cross-border deployment of charging infrastructure and reduce administrative complexity for both manufacturers and operators alike. So at the end of the day, the objective here is to encourage interoperability by design to avoid a well-guarded model and stranded assets. The objective is also to avoid fragmentation at the national level, to create as much as possible a single market for EVSEs, for flexibility and smart charging services that would benefit the consumer and the driver. As Tom was saying a bit earlier, in terms of regulation and funding, a lot has been done, but the main part that's missing now is the implementation or the transposition when we're speaking about directive. Thinking, for instance, about the renewable directive and the Article 28. If we are going to a third set of recommendation, thanks, Theo. Those are about addressing future needs to guide anticipatory investments. Again, going on why this is important, the road might not be straightforward, but the fact is that EV adoption is continuing and growing, and that we have, according to Charge Up Europe number, an estimated need of 38.5 million charge points in the EU by 2035. And to this need, you need to add growing demand for electric HDVs. So to be successful here, we need to have infrastructure that match demands in terms of location and use cases. You need to have a grid that's ready for new loads, and you need a scalable and local deployment processes. So that's the context in which we need to think about anticipatory investments. Now, I think it's important to remind as well that anticipatory investments are not new. They are legally possible, even if there is no, at the European level, a legal, or at the national level, legal definitions. Anticipatory investments would be defined as investment that looks beyond the immediate needs of a generation or demand into the mid and long term, while assuming with a sufficient level of certainty that new generation and or demand will materialize, even if you have a potential low utilization in the short term. So in order to encourage those, with the platform, we propose 3 broad recommendations. The first step is to reduce uncertainty by improving the information available. And for this, there is 2 ways that we want to highlight. The first one is a better forecasting of future transport demand and the capacity needs to enable system operator to make better informed decisions and prioritize grid connection requests more effectively. And to do this, we need a clear guidance on how data needs to be collected and shared in full respect of protection of commercial interests among the stakeholders involved. And then we also recommend that anticipatory investment should be built on holistic European and national energy plans and be monitored by independent energy regulator. That is why we recommend a better coordination between the national energy and climate plans and the distribution network development plans within the integration of national and regional EV infrastructure roadmap into those 2 plans. Looking at the second recommendation, the second step is looking at the regulatory framework itself. Speaking on behalf of the charging industry here, there is a key barrier that we're seeing in the current design of the regulated asset base, which provide an insufficient framework and incentives or does not permit grid operators to invest proactively in digitalization or smarter grid capabilities. So shifting from this CapEx mindset to a bit more OpEx oriented. And then, if we look at the anticipatory into the regulatory framework, we think that investing in an anticipatory manner implies that there could be a mismatch between actual development. So the regulatory framework needs to be defined at the outset, clearly about how deviations, so underinvestment or overinvestments, are going to be taken care of, and how it evolves to facilitate the management of uncertainties that arise from the energy transition. So in fine here, the objective is that DSO should be empowered to make anticipatory investments that can handle future needs, particularly in areas where there is high capacity charging stations are required. Thinking again about electric HGVs. This investment should support the implementation, of course, of AFIR provisions and the rollout of EHGV charging infrastructure along the TNT network. The final recommendation is about a blueprint to ease local planning rules. We believe that cost and complexity of grid connection can be rationalized by optimizing the deployment of charging infrastructure in accordance with charging needs. So number of points to be installed per EV on the road, location, power, circuit type, etc. And we believe here that a key enabler is the right cooperation between local and regional authorities and stakeholders of the electromobility ecosystem in the deployment of recharging infrastructure, for instance, by implementing a blueprint for recharging infrastructure. This document will be defined by local authorities in consultation with relevant stakeholders, would comprise the local planning rules for the implementation of recharging infrastructure for the recharging of infrastructure in main highway and on national roads, and it would assess as well charging infrastructure needs, considering existing public accessible infrastructure and the private one. It could as well further enhance the existing work completed by the Sustainable Transport Forum on these aspects. And
thank you, Antoine, for the end of this few recommendations from the platform for electromobility. I see Paul managed to join us. Paul, you are able to listen to us, to see us, but unfortunately not to connect. So you found your way into the stage. So welcome back. and I'll give you the floor for the rest of the moderation for this morning.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and apologies for my technical issues, but now it seems to work. So yeah, apologies for that. So my name is Paul Wilczek. I'm the chair of the working group here for the platform for e-mobility, and in my daily role, I work at Eurelectric as head of the energy policy team here. Right. So thanks a lot to Antoine and Laia for the presentations. I think we have a bit of time now to discuss what has been said, to also look at what questions came from the audience, in fact. So as you see, we do have here a Q&A function and a pretty active chat going on those. Right, so let's maybe address a few of these. And the one that I found interesting, because there's many, so I will do a little bit of a selection here, is by Sam. It doesn't say from where. Well, Sam, how do you feel about binding timelines with appropriate incentive structures going ahead with for system operators to connect projects? Is this an idea? So what sort of bindingness versus incentive structure do you see appropriate? I think this is a question to Laia. And also for the national authorities to complete permitting for grid projects. So the bindingness can be, of course, both sides. So one thing is to ask a system operator to, to have something firm versus indicative. And another thing is to ask national authorities to have a cutoff date for basically permitting and make this permitting then a default. So yeah, maybe this is a question to you, Laia. So how do you see this balance between what sort of bindingness do we need in terms of of helping to the grid projects to come about after all, right? This is probably the question, and it's probably also a question to Tom House from the Commission. So where do you see the right balance? Maybe Laia, if you want to give it a go.
Yes, so I was trying to unmute myself. So I think that the bindingness, it's quite difficult to implement, because multiple projects do rely on aspects that are not controllable at all times. So I think it's good to have an indicative timeline, but to make it fully binding, and like I'm not sure what benefits would it have, and also what would be the consequences then if the project cannot be delivered by then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you think about then, making a cutoff date for public authorities to say, right, you have whatever amount of X months. If there's no decision, it is permitted. Is there well, I don't know if this is a totally new discussion perhaps, or something new, but we can also just have a discussion about it. But yeah, quite an interesting question, I thought. Maybe, yeah, here's another question. Any best practices from EU member states or other regions in the world that could inspire EU-level policy action? Maybe this is also to be expanded to Antoine, the charge point operative. Where do you see a lighthouse anywhere where we can learn from?
Yeah, I think depending on so we had several broad recommendations here, but then you can see all over different member states, like some good practices that we could be at the European level, be inspired of. I think, like if you look, for instance, in Spain about the prioritization criteria that enables Spain to focus on project readiness based on permitting and financing status over chronological application order when looking to connection to the grid, and that provides a strong basis of how speculative projects can, for instance, be filtered out to free up grid capacity for viable investments. Similarly, Poland's the government drive prioritization of EV charging hubs that demonstrate how national policy can get grid access toward infrastructure that serve strategic electrification objectives. I was speaking about anticipatory investments and grid plans a bit earlier. If you look at the regional level, the French, for instance, regional schema schemes for deployment for renewable energy and for charging stations, two separate schemes that were implemented a few years ago, are interesting ideas as well. And on the anticipatory investment part, and how do you need to mitigate risk of under demand or underutilization? Like you can look at the Denmark green supplement, the green supplement implemented in Denmark that incentivize TSOs to make those anticipatory investments.
Yes, indeed. I think there's a couple of good practices with regards to actually regulators to allow for anticipatory investments. Anything on your side, Laia? Where do you see from the DSO perspective some really good practices going on in this regard? Anything you would like to highlight?
Yeah, so I cannot come up at this moment with a very specific good example or a good practice, but it is for sure something that we've been advocating for from a long time ago. It would be very beneficial to foster the electrification of multiple end users, and I think it's important that we come up with a good mechanism to allow them and to be able to forecast upcoming demand in a better way that we have been doing until now.
Yeah, I think that there's also a link. That's also another question. There's a link to another question with regards to actually the transparency and the hosting capacity maps. This is also one of the asks of the platform. It's a question from the Regulatory Assistance Project by Julia. Could such capacity maps be implemented by the European Commission? Yeah, in what way? Is this something that the Commission could do, or could it be an extension of the European Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Observatory? Something in collaboration with the DSOs? I think this is a question to you both, Tom and Laia. So what are your views on the hosting capacity maps, and how could the EU help on these?
Well, from my side, I think there are some people already anticipating what NSOE and ACER are developing. From on the official front, these maps and all the data behind it are meant to be rolling out in these coming months. We've already seen some private initiatives gathering the different data from the different TSOs already. So I think that information is partly up there already, and rolling out officially very soon. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I may add, I think that trying to harmonize grid capacity maps would be a really huge effort, would require a lot of data to be out there, and I am not sure what would be the benefit of it at the end of the day, because this is something that each DSO can provide, and if there are good guidelines on how this should be done, I think it can and should be done at DSO level, and it should not be something that the European Union should take the role, mainly because we have a lot of other issues that require more of a EU drive, and I believe that this is something that can be done at DSO level.
We can drive lots of things at the same time, but you're right. The level of granularity is not a given. I mean, there's the EU requirement that we have this data, and that's what you're working on. And I think for DSOs, it's got to be provided at a quarterly level.
Mm-hmm.
But the granularity, how that's presented, as you say, there's different circumstances in all those different DSOs, not least as well as the TSOs. So quite the level of harmonization is a different matter. I think getting any kind of information out there that starts to satisfy both the off-takers and the generators who are wanting connections, it's more critical to get something out there ASAP.
Yeah, I think there's nothing probably so heterogeneous as the DSO structure in Europe, right? In terms of public entities, if you will, perhaps. And I think this is a point, where we need to strike this balance between what you are saying, Tom, and Laia, and what you are referring to, Laia, in particular. I think it's right to say also there's really different resources between the various DSOs out here in Europe and what they can do and what they can provide. Interesting point, though.
Paul, if I may, on this topic, I think to add one point, I think at the European level, the regulatory framework already exists with the AMD. The main missing part here is the implementation at the national level. If you look at the AMD and the Article 31(3), that mandate more granular data to be shared by DSO, it will only be transposed by one member state. And this, I think, is the main problem and the lack of standardization. You cannot complain about the lack of standardization at the European level. First, you need to complain about the lack of transposition of the directive. And then when it will be transposed, maybe further guideline on how you need to have standardization of this data needs to be shared. But the first step is to be sure that every member state transposes this directive so that the data is available for CPOs to be useful too.
All right. We have here another one. Is there any high-level quantitative analysis to show what effect these recommendations would have on removing inefficiencies in the market? So is there a cost-benefit analysis, I suppose this is what it's supposed to say, in terms of cost reductions that an electricity consumer expect over the coming years? I think there are various studies out there by various by various institutions, from think tanks to public bodies. So I think I can start quoting one, which I know at least is about grid reinforcement. So I think the notion generally is always €1 invested in grid reinforcement gives you back €2 in system savings overall in the mid to long term. This is kind of the ballpark figure that I think we need to bear in mind, that I've heard now many times from many sides. But happy to hear what you see as reference points, or you made also at national or case level from the charging point DSO, or also from your perspective, Tom, overall in the EU in terms of impact assessments on such high level quantitative analysis. So who would like to start?
Well, just briefly in terms of the contribution of reduced queuing on the whole access to the flexibility in terms of flexible grid access and flexibility in the market. Every study that's ever been produced shows the huge savings, system cost savings that come from increased flexibility, and this is a dimension that contributes to that. But I guess it would be good to have some more detailed case studies to show more precisely what the gains are. But the starting point is that queuing is inefficient in terms of how a system operates economically, and a system where there are incentives or other regulatory regimes that reduce queuing are more efficient and save money.
Yeah. No. The queuing is really an issue. I think that is a very evident one to go about. Well, however, we do have, of course, our guest here from the European Parliament, Dario Tamburrano, MEP from the Left Group, who would like to welcome here to the discussion as well. So good day to Mr. Tamburrano, and welcome to the discussion as well.
Sure.
Happy to have you here on board. I would like to give you now the floor for a couple of opening remarks or reflections, if you will, on what you have heard so far in terms of discussion and your take on this, nexus of e-mobility and grid investments, grid reinforcements, and what it ultimately means for the consumer.
I really thank you for the invitation, and the electromobility is one of the main focus of my activity in the European Parliament, and even before coming here for the second time. And Europe is moving fast towards electric transport, and I think it is a great news for our climate and our economy. But this change also brings new challenges. For the number of electric vehicles is growing quickly, so the demand for charging points is increasing everywhere. This is putting a lot of pressure on our electricity grids. System operators receive many new connection requests, and the current first-come, first-served rules are often too slow and not flexible enough. For example, in my case, my private case, I waited for 5 months to have my private wall box in 3 kilowatt wall box in Rome. So I think it's not possible to have a larger transition to electromobility if the situation is this, in one of the most important member states of Europe. And it is a problem that a lot of friends and colleagues meet. So I am not an isolated case. At the same time, we are not yet using the full potential of electric car batteries and smart charging to help the grid. To face these challenges, Europe needs a clear and strong policy framework that supports grid-friendly electrification. This means 3 main things. 1, faster grid connection. 2, common rules for data and communication between actors. And 3, better planning for future investments. One key element is the digitalization. Easy and real-time access to data on grid capacity can make a big difference. If you had simple, regularly updated maps of grid capacity, developers could plan better, avoid delays, and make smarter investments. In the end, strong, digital, and flexible grids are not only about cables and transformers. They are the foundation of Europe's electric mobility. They make charging faster, smarter, and more reliable, and they will help us reach a cleaner and more sustainable transport system. And at the moment, we are facing in the European Parliament a strong opposition to the electric transition. And I think it is an opposition that is moved by particular economic interest, and in part from knowledge by political decision maker of the technology, on the possibility, on the advantages of the electric mobility as resilience, decarbonization, even for autonomous for the strategy for the autonomy and the resilience of the European Union. Have you some question about?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's very clear. Of course, I mean, I can maybe start with some questions from our side, from the platform side, myself, and obviously to all the participants, please feel free to come in here on the question and answer function. The first question would be, so what is your view on the role of public ownership of the public authorities? Italy is a very regionalized country. The country I'm coming from is also very regionalized, so what is your view on the role of public ownership, regional planning in ensuring, EV infrastructure deployment and rollout? Basically the balance versus this more centralized approach, central planning versus what needs to come from local authorities, which at the end of the day have to do the permitting at local level because it's low and mid voltage infrastructure at the end of the day.
I think that the most important thing is to ensure that regulators are given the task and the means to investigate uncompetitive practice. In Italy, there is a high concentrated market, which is a part of the cause of high prices. The information that the people receive on pricing and how to pay is very difficult to understand, which leads to confusion, frustration, especially when they don't understand why paying systems are so complicated and how much they need to pay. Regulators should require operators to publish price in a transparent manner and should create a comparison tool. In Italy, a group of citizen activists created an app to compare the prices between operators, but it is a self-made initiative. The authorities should do it in a better way, of course. People should check price and decide where they want to charge, having the information that is most relevant for them. In Italy, we have the price at our charging point that is about the double of the other part of Europe. So we have a political campaign against electrification of mobility, and we have also people, middle class, that even if they would like to pass to electric mobility, when they go to make the addition, the bill that they will go to pay, they decide not to pass to electric mobility, for they are going to spend the same like a gasoline or a diesel car. So if you have the cost of an electric car that at the moment is still more expensive than an internal combustion engine car, and then you will not save money with the charging, it's difficult to convince people to make this transition.
No, this is a very important point. Basically, what we are lacking, it seems, is transparent information tools, comparison platforms, that are non-commercial, in fact, and that tell you, okay, in the long term, in your decision to buy a new car, or go for this or go for that, you can save this much. Also, there's maybe this funding opportunity available for you in your region or in your country. There's this, subsidy available for you, perhaps, this sort of funding scheme available for you. Social leasing is also a topic in some member states, I know. So, this is something that is probably well identified also, at industry level, I presume, the lack of trustworthy and, non-commercial comparison tools, information tools at public level. I think this is what you're referring to. That's a very good point. Thanks for that. Another point is, of course, you are a member of the parliament, and the parliament now is very, heterogeneous as we see it. What is your view now? There's obviously this push and pull between industrial policy, competitiveness, the climate change agenda, what we see now in the ongoing debate, the potential opening up of the CO2 emission targets for transport, the need to invest in grids, because we need to invest in grids, because in many places, with or without the energy transition, they are underfunded anyway. So, it's a more general question, but how do you see in the parliament and yourself as a policymaker the golden equation to make these push and pulls work? After all, what is the right balance?
I think the most important thing is not going back on decision that we made in the previous legislature. The ban on internal combustion engines is giving the industry the certainty that it needs to plan the transition. Going back on this decision means punishing those companies that already made investments like, for example, Volvo, just to nominate one. This is also important to ensure the mobility is resilient. Here in European Parliament, there is a lot of discussion about the resilient, the defense, and so on. And but for example, in Ukraine, there is a boom in the sale of electric vehicles. The reason is that it is difficult for them to secure enough petrol or diesel imports, while they already have a lot of solar panels which they can use to power the cars. And it is true in period of peace and in period of war. The system, the mobility system built of local production of renewable energy and local grids that are structured to support the electric mobility is the most resilient system that we can build at the moment, even in period of peace and in period of war. We also need to continue promoting the expansion of renewable power generation, besides the reinforcing, of course, of the grid. For we have at the moment a lot of power generation, renewable power generation, but I think that Europe is not working enough on reinforcing the grid to support the electric mobility. And this is not important for the environment. It is also important for people because renewable electricity is cheaper than electricity produced with fossil fuels. But nobody is acting to explain to people this reality. People think that electric mobility is more expensive, but the reality is that it is less expensive. But we have to act to make the recharge really less expensive, like the renewable electricity is less expensive. And at the moment, for example, in Italy, is convenient only for people that they have a domestic wall box to have an electric car. For all other people, we can go to have to pay the same for the high price of public recharging. So the politics should act in this sense to have a control of the market, to make subsidies more on giving the electricity, low price electricity to people more than buying new cars. For the electric cars are going to have a lower price now and the future. But if we don't act to the price of electricity, it could be very difficult to convince people of the benefit of this transition.
Yeah. No, indeed. I think from the industry side that we, after all, at the platform represent, it's important that we are dealing with stable, regulatory frameworks. So this instability, you have agreed files in the Green Deal, and then they might be reopened. This is obviously very, concerning to us when it comes to investments. This is a very good point. Also, of course, I don't want to exclude here at all Laia, Tom, Antoine from this discussion. So please feel free to come in if you have any comments in this conversation with Mr. Tamburano, of course. I think you are still all online. Otherwise, we go also with questions in the Q&A bot. Just to say, some questions here are very technical, some are less so in the Q&A. Thanks for those as well. Those who we can't address right now in terms of questions, we will address them later in writing, if that's okay for all the participants in this webinar. So please don't feel excluded or anything here. Yeah. So Antoine, Laia, Tom, any also views, comments, points you would like to make in view of the conversation we had so far with Mr. Tamburano? Any questions to him directly?
I can go first if you want. Paul, and thanks very much, Mr. Tamburano, for your explanation, for being here today. I think trying to make the link between what we had recommended as a platform, what you said, Tom, and what you said, Mr. Tamburano, is about and the question of how do we make the transition to EV works for everyone, and how do we make it accessible for everyone, especially in a difficult or tense fiscal context at the European level. And looking at, we've been discussing recommendation and if we should decide and implement things at the national or the European level, or having a simplification packages and grid packages, etc. I think the main key and the key aspect to keep it high level here is to make Europe works, which is like that a services, a stations, a vehicle that is sold in Lisbon can be sold in Berlin as well. And I think when we're thinking about should we be discussed at the European level or at the national level, at the regional level, or what should be the right level to implement things, we should always remind us that the Draghi report and the IMF numbers, which are that internal barriers are estimated in Europe, to be an equivalent to a 45% tariff. That services are facing barriers in Europe that are even more severe, equivalent to a 110% tariff, and that those tariffs prevent manufacturing and prevent the industry to grow in Europe and affect negatively the consumer, especially in transition such as the EV one. So I think that should be the focus when we're looking at packages, at new service, at new regulations. It's about how can we make it work in whole Europe.
Thanks, Antoine. I think this was a mix of a question and a statement, right? So
can I? But we tried to propose in the ITRE committee an initiative report about the needs of dedicated framework for electric mobility, for market surveillance, and for have a coherent legislation all over Europe. But we were not successful to have this initiative report. I think that the actual framework with for example, the regulation about alternative fuels and the directive of electricity market are not enough. For we have a lot of things that are in piece of legislation, but we have not a correct abstract and a dedicated framework for electricity mobility. So I think that we have to collect this piece of legislation to update them to the actual situation of the market, of the technology, and to build a new proposal that is conceived from the beginning only for electric transport and electric mobility in Italy. And for example, some weeks ago, an association of consumers in Italy, Adiconsum, made an event where they revealed a study. They went to the sellers of electric cars, and which study revealed that the sellers doesn't know the product they are going to sell. And they don't know, for example, what the state of health of a battery means. And it's very difficult to sell electric cars if the seller doesn't know the products, is not able to explain the advantage and the problem that you can incur if you buy an electric car. The problem is that we have in Europe, and especially in Italy, a lot of fake news about electric cars, and the sellers are not interested really in selling electric cars, and there are not enough skill to sell this kind of product. So you have the case, for example, now we had some weeks ago large incentives for buying electric cars. So we'll have a new generation of owners of electric cars, but they don't know anything about charging, the cost of charging, the time of charging, the way they have to maintain the battery health. And when we studied to have the patent to drive an internal combustion engines, we had to learn a lot of things about the engines, il cambio calcolatori, the transmission, how the traditional cars works. And nothing of this is happening now. So we have the fake news are going to spread for people doesn't know. And even if we have a new electric car owners with no information, we have the risk to have a lot of disillusion for the electric cars. Is not the same thing of an old kind of cars. They are different. And you have to be skilled, and you have to know the benefit and the problems before you are going to buy it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, just to be mindful of time as well, and allow everybody, of course, to come in case Laia or Tom would also have any remarks to make or questions to ask back to Mr. Tamburano.
Perhaps I would just briefly say that I think it's great that Mr. Tamburano and other MEPs monitor the space both in their member state and in terms of the implementation of the acquis. I think whether we need something more dedicated to electromobility uniquely, I think that's an issue that we can be picking up as we review AFIR and go forward with our through the impact assessment, through the public consultations. We can be assessing whether there are things falling through the gaps, and whether there's a special need to target one sector in particular, or whether the approach of bringing everybody around the table and really focusing on the linkages between what's all that needs to happen on the energy side together with what's happening on e-mobility and data and transport infrastructure, what way we can reinforce that, whether there's something we can do jointly or whether there's a targeted approach. I think that's something that it's great that the Parliament is keeping an eye on, and it would be good to have indeed feedback from other member states about the state of whether it's the state of implementation or the different issues being encountered in different member states. And that's certainly information that we can be then using as we take forward our review.
Yeah. Thanks
Can
for that. Yeah.
Can I make a proposal? To create a new framework is not easy. It needs time and a political support. But there are some little things that we can create, and it's not difficult to insert in some piece of legislation. We are speaking about the needs of passport for products, sustainable products, and so on. And I know that the Commission is pushing for the generation of an used cars, electric cars market. And but I think that we can propose together. I can help you with my colleagues in the Parliament, with Tobax and others, the passport, a battery passport for used cars to increase the trust of the owners, of the people in buying electric cars. For you know that the most important things in buying used cars is the state of battery. And we have taken a solution to know the state of battery, the state of health of the battery, which is a technical definition. But we have not a legal harmonized definition and technical frameworks of the certification of the state of batteries around Europe. We have a lot of firms that can release a certification of state of batteries, but I think that we have to harmonize a label. We have to create a new label about the state of batteries that should be mandatory for selling electric cars. So people will have more trust in buying electric cars. For electric cars, even if it is a long kilometrage, for example, but the state of batteries is good, it's like a new one. Or you can buy, if you want, a car with a not good state of batteries, But if you are going to use it for short trips during the weeks, just to go to the work, to come back to home, it could be a good affair to buy an old car, even if the batteries is not so excellent. This is just an example of a simple innovation of a technical certification that I think could generate trust in the consumer that are approaching to mobility, buying used cars.
Yeah, thank you. No, these are all very valid points, and thank you also for the offer for this enforced dialogue, commitment, and I think conversation now that we had, but also that we can continue further, of course, outside of such a webinar scope that we have. We're unfortunately running out of time, and this is always the case in such interesting conversations. At the end, they become then really interesting, but there are time constraints. So just to say, we of course have this possibility for everybody for replay of the webinar as it has been recorded for those who would like to see it again or hear it again. We also intend to answer some of the questions that have been raised in writing, so that's well understood. Thank you very, very much from the institution side to Mr. Tamburano, Tom from the Commission, Laia from ETSO, Antoine from ChargePoint. That was super interesting. We are continuing with webinars from the platform side. We have one upcoming on the upcoming AFIA revision, so stay tuned for that. And also from my side, I found this really interesting. Sorry again for my technical issues at the start, and happy to stay in touch and continue the discussion. So a lot still upcoming on e-mobility. All right. Thanks a lot and have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.